Great. Looks like we're live and I see folks joining in. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited for our conversation today. Today we have a great chat with Sam from Modern Treasury and Amy from Nacha. We'll get started shortly. We'll just let the attendee number go up a bit and we'll get going. Today we'll be talking about how companies innovate on the ACH network, how companies are using both the ACH rules and guidelines to create novel experiences, but also using providers like Modern Treasury. So we have an interesting conversation for you today. And I also heard that we may have some special stats from Amy today that we are the very first ones to hear from.
That's right. Well, you might not be the very first, but it's definitely early. So lots of good stuff in store for today.
Awesome. And yes, we're recording the session, so we'll be making it available on our Modern Treasury website after it. Okay, it looks like we're at a good amount of folks. We can get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Lucas Hosha. I'm a product marketer here at Modern Treasury. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Modern Treasury is the operating system for money movement. So we help companies move, track, and reconcile a high volume of payments at scale. And as one of the foundational payment rails in the US, ACH is core to our mission. So today we'll be discussing how the companies we work with and companies in general can use the ACH network to drive innovation. So whether you're a payments leader, a finance leader, a product leader, we hope this conversation is helpful for you today and you can take something that's valuable for your day job. Before we start, though, I just wanted to let everyone know that you can drop questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. And if it's appropriate to the conversation we're having, I'm happy to bring that question in. If it's something that is a better fit for the end of the conversation, we'll resume and take questions at the end. Now let's just start with intros, very quick intros. Sam, would love to start with you. Can you just briefly introduce yourselves? And we're very happy to have you guys here today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm Sam Aarons. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Modern Treasury. I lead our engineering and compliance teams, and I usually call myself our resident payments expert or resident payments nerd. I'd like to dive into the nitty-gritty of how payment systems work both here and around the world. And so this is a big passion of mine, is learning about different payment systems and getting into the details. But yeah, that's my background.
Thank you, Sam. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Morris. I'm a senior director in the ACH Network Rules Department at Nacha. I am a fellow payments geek. I have worked for a financial institution. I have worked for fintech, and I have worked for a credit card company in their regulations department as well. So at Nacha, I help work through the rulemaking process with our members, as well as I liaise to our Payments Innovation Alliance as a member of the rules team, and also perform a lot of educational activities such as this webinar. So I'm really happy to be here with you guys today.
Well, we're very excited to have you here, Amy, to talk to us. Maybe let's start with the background on Nacha. Can you give us a sense of what the organization is about and what the role that it plays in managing the ACH network?
Sure, because sometimes folks get confused about what Nacha does and does not do. So we like to say that Nacha is the administrator of the network, or we handle the logical side of the network, while what we call the ACH operators handle the physical or the technological part of the network. So Nacha is an administrator, meaning that we perform some functions necessary to the network, such as gathering some of the stats we're going to talk about today. We also are the rulemaking body for the ACH network, and we have an enforcement arm for those rules as well. And then we, again, I mentioned education before. We have an important education role, as well as helping to bring the network, network participants, as well as just payments folks together in general, things like our payments conference, and performing an advocacy role, and helping to educate the industry, regulators, governments, et cetera, on the ACH network and payments in general. But we don't actually see the transactions. We don't process any transactions. That's handled by those ACH operators. And in the US, we have two, the Federal Reserve and the Electronic Payments Network, EPN, which is held by the clearinghouse. So a little bit of, differentiation, as I said, Nacha being more on the logical side, the admin side versus the processing side.
But a lot of the operating rules and how companies interact with ACH and banks interact with ACH are written by folks on your team.
Yes, all of those rules are written by our team in conjunction with our rulemaking committees, as well as we have a public process for rulemaking to gather comments as well. So all of that goes through our team, and those are the rights and responsibilities of every participant in the ACH network.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Sam, over to you. Can you give us just a general overview on Modern Treasury?
Yeah, absolutely. So Modern Treasury is what we call in the Nacha parlance, an ACH service provider. So what we do is we provide software that makes it easy to initiate, track, and reconcile payments across a variety of different payment rails, across a variety of different countries, and a variety of different banks. So being predominantly based in the United States, one of our largest payment networks is the ACH network. So for ACH specifically, we build a lot of tools that help companies originate ACH payments. Like Amy said, there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of operating guidelines for how you generate these very specific payments. There's very specific rules for how you monitor them for any returns or reversals. And Modern Treasury essentially encodes all of that in a software platform that makes it very easy to use the ACH network at scale. So if you're sending a lot of ACH payments, Modern Treasury is essentially helping facilitate that by generating the file, tracking where those payments are, and ultimately reconciling your books at the end of the day.
And Sam, the origin story of Modern Treasury is deeply related to you,
Yes.
dealing with the Nacha guidelines, right, and interacting with the work that the Nacha had been putting out. Can you tell us a little bit about that origin story, and how did you come to this problem?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, me and the other co-founders of Modern Treasury, Matt and Dimitri, the three of us used to work at a mortgage company. And at this mortgage company, we were responsible for building this product. The actual product itself isn't important, but inside of a mortgage company, it needed to interact with the ACH system because we were interacting with property investors, we were interacting with borrowers. So there was a lot of ACH flowing around. And very, very quickly, working at this company, at Lending Home, we had to figure out how to use the ACH system. And so when we went to our financial institution, we asked them, okay, we need to be able to originate ACH payments. How do you do that? And one of the first things they said is, well, you're going to have to learn the rules. And I apologize for this prop, but Amy's super familiar with this, but essentially we got a version of this, which is a 900-page book, which is the operating rules and guidelines for the ACH network. And we were told, build some software to implement these 900 pages of rules, and then you can start sending payments through the bank. And we had to do just that. We had to learn the rules, understand what the exact formatting is, understand how the ACH system operates, and we had to build software to do this. And after we had done it, we then went around and we asked other companies like, hey, how did you guys do it? And every single company answered the same way, which is we built it ourselves. We also had a team of engineers who went in, learned the rules, built this system, and it's sort of plucking along internally. And that's what gave us the idea to build Modern Treasury, which is a service that people can use where they don't have to repeatedly exercise resources to learn all those rules and be a good partner for the ACH network. So we decided to start Modern Treasury in part to just make it easier to interface with the ACH system and the myriad rules that it has, which are all good rules, which we can get into in a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Modern Treasury is a Nacha preferred partner. We're very excited. The work of both of our organizations is very complementary. There has been a lot of innovation that the ACH network has driven since its inception in 1972, from digitizing checks to now new settlement windows and same-day ACH more recently. We thought it could be a good a good conversation today for us to, starting to dive in a little deeper. Would love to hear from you, Amy, on, can you just give us an overview of the innovations that the ACH network has kind of put forth since its inception?
Absolutely. So really innovation is just at the very heart, the very core of Nacha and the ACH network. It really is what we were founded on. So as you said, back in 1972, there was the first regional ACH network exchange created in California as a result of the Scope Committee, a committee that was put together to figure out how to create paperless payments. And so after that first one popped up, a number of them quickly popped up over the next couple of years, again, all regional. And so very quickly, by 1974, it was recognized that there was a need to create interoperability between all of these regional networks. And so Nacha was created with the purpose of creating that strategy of a national network. And so to create that interoperability, you needed rules, you needed formats, and you needed all of those things that all participants could agree to eliminate each individual exchange and sometimes individual financial institutions from having to have bilateral agreements with each other in order to do this. And so that's really where we started with the first use case, probably no surprise, being direct deposit. And most specifically, the Department of Defense needed a way to pay service members all over the place. And if you think about it, that's very high volume and again, spread out geographically. And so the ACH network's very first format was what we call the PPD, which is a way for organizations to either push funds or pull funds from a consumer's account. Started out very, very basic. And also the federal government usage grew from there. Obviously, we know that Social Security, think about your tax credits, more than 97% of federal government payments are now dispersed through the ACH network. And it all started out because, of that need. The majority of people, more than 93% of people that work today get direct deposit, still on that same 1975, format that has, been modernized over time, but really just fit that need. And over time, then the network has expanded, added on corporate transactions, very shortly after. A lot of things happened in a short succession over, about less than 10 years. Because there was no internet, there was no, remote deposit capture, financial institutions sometimes would create little networks that they would band together and allow for their customers to be able to deposit or use the ATMs of the other financial institution. The ACH network created formats to allow for those transactions to settle. In the 90s, the ACH created formats for check conversion, well before Check 21 mandated image exchange for paper checks. And we created formats for telephone payments and then later on internet payments and further after that mobile. And we're going to continue to talk about those things today, like you said, things like same day ACH and, things born out of risk management like micro entries. And so truly, like I said at the beginning, at the core is innovation. And so while we started from, those small things that I just mentioned, and we might be talking about dates back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, why are we still here today talking about ACH? Well, it's because it is still the dominant network in the United States for making payments. I'm going to share some statistics with you guys. These are our 2023 numbers, and these, you're getting a sneak peek here. As I said, they're technically going to be released. You'll be able to find infographics and all kinds of great stuff on our website on the 14th. But volume in the ACH network overall still grew 4.8% last year in terms of number of transactions and 4.4% in terms of dollar. And that's off of a huge number. That brings the network to 31.5 billion payments in 2023 for $80.1 trillion. So it really, really underscores the importance of, the ACH network and how it continues to thrive even in today's environment. And that's because of the innovation. So we added 1.5 billion transactions last year alone. We've added over $1 trillion in value for over 11 years. So again, this is a high rate of growth on top of very large numbers. One thing that is unique to the ACH network also is the fact that we process debits and credits. So the percentage of that 2023 volume is about 57% in terms of the number of debits, 43 credits. But the value actually flips when you look at the payments that go through, and 2/3 of the value is actually in credit transactions. In some of the breakdown, some people ask us about that. B2B is really where it's at. And so this conversation is very timely because we've seen a sharp increase in B2B transactions over the last couple of years, because there's been forced innovation as a result of some of the circumstances people found themselves in due to the pandemic, et cetera. So 6.6 billion B2B payments on the network last year, and that's up 11% over the year before. The other growth leaders are on the consumer side, those internet debits, and still good old fashioned direct deposit, those, credits to consumers. So the ACH network really, truly is thriving. I also have a little bit to tell you here on same day ACH. Those are payments that are put into the network and settled just a couple of hours later. Almost 853.5 million transactions through same day for 2.4 trillion. And those transactions are almost 50-50 debit and credit, but the dollar value is split the same way as the rest of the network, with 2/3 of that value in credits. And those use cases, those same big use cases, the B2B and the same two for the consumer, are the same ones that we see leading in same day. So we continue to bring this innovation, and we see that it is being used. And so it's really important, that we continue to learn, continue to, innovate and manage the ACH network.
No, the ACH network underpins so much of the innovation we've had in payments since the 70s. And, in the conversation with Sam recently, we were talking about the role of the operating rules and guidelines in itself, and the role that the rules themselves played in driving innovation. And I'll tee this one up for you, Sam. Would love for you to share with the audience why you think that is, and what do you think the role that the rules played in terms of driving innovation for ACH?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're talking about 50 years here. We're talking about 50 years of rules, and every year it's meaningfully different. Like, I feel like that is a real innovation in a payment system that, coming from looking at a lot of payment systems in general, like domestically or internationally, I think that's really unique to how Nacha, operates its guidelines for how it determines the rules for the ACH system. The rules are constantly changing in response to market practices, and they're allowing certain market practices to grow and flourish, and adding new use cases as it sees demands. Like the ACH system, Amy, you said it perfectly. Like, those numbers keep going up. Like, same day goes up, B2B transactions go up. I think a large part of that is because ACH stays an innovative network, because Nacha is willing to look at its rules, revise its guidelines, change things, allow for new rules to take place, and allow for people to do more interesting, innovative things. I think, Lucas, you may have mentioned this, or Amy, it was you who mentioned this, but the most recent example I can think of is there's a very common pattern of doing micro deposits, where to verify someone's account, you would send 2 small deposits. They would confirm, the user would confirm on a website or over the phone, and then the consumer, the originator, excuse me, would claw those micro deposits back. And the Nacha network saw that this was a use case, and it saw that it needed some way to standardize this so that financial institutions and originators alike could agree on, hey, these small things are micro deposits that will probably be clawed back no matter what. And there are rules that came out for it, and then everyone followed those rules. And now everyone can continue using ACH for micro deposits, but that's just one example. I mean, there's a myriad of examples. Amy, we had talked about this a couple weeks ago, but the internet didn't exist in 1972, yet we have a web record code that we can use for payments. And so we have a way to incorporate internet-based payments into ACH by this new SEC code and all the rules that come into it. And that's just an example of the ACH system innovating. And so I think,
And even Sam, I'll just say that was, we even have an example of not having to make a huge change to the industry and continue to innovate, in that when mobile became so prevalent, we opened up the web rules and we didn't have to create a new SEC code. So we didn't have to create havoc in the industry, but still the rules accommodated that innovation for mobile as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think all of that to say that, Amy, it's not a static network. And I think that's one of the things I want to get across to the attendees today, is that the ACH system is hugely dynamic, because every year new things change that allow originators to do more and more payments over the ACH system. And one of the biggest innovations there is the rules for allowing same-day ACH. That really allowed, I think, the ACH network to grow. I mean, Amy, you just quoted some numbers there, but it basically eliminates a lot of other use cases when you can say, hey, I'll send you the money same day using the system that I already use for all my other payments, and I can essentially just make the effective date today. I know there are a lot of other rules around that, but I can basically just change a field and say, no, pay it out today. And the whole system works because everyone agrees, because everyone abides by the guidelines set out by Nacha. And that's a very unique aspect to the system. The one other call out I'll make here is the United States in general is tremendously unique in the sheer number of financial institutions that we have. It is nowhere near that in other, in other currencies, in other countries, in other currency zones. The United States has thousands of financial institutions. And so there is a need absolutely for Nacha to create rules and guidelines, because we have so many more participants than other countries. I think that also makes it all the more impressive that everyone can and does follow the rules, is that we have way more rules that change in response to real practices, and everything still works the way it should. I think it's just, it's a phenomenal accomplishment. But really want to underscore that it's a growing network and a dynamic network.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And I'm just going to give a shout out there. As I mentioned before, there is also a public process to the rulemaking. So we always invite any participant in the network to have a voice in that process as well.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why the rules make so much sense, I think, is you're not just making them up in an ivory tower, pardon the expression, but you're actually listening to financial institutions, to originators, to service providers such as Modern Treasury, and to third-party senders as well. I think the Nacha rules have done a great job of delineating different groups of stakeholders in the ACH network, and how they play into the system. And of course, Modern Treasury is a service provider, and we're glad that there is a category that we fall into, because we can tell financial institutions Modern Treasury is a third-party service provider, and instantly they know what we are and what we do. And it's just nice to be able to have those, those starting ground rules to begin a relationship from.
We will dive a little deeper on how Modern Treasury is helping companies and some of the stories of customers we work with. But this conversation got the juices flowing in the audience. We actually got a handful of questions here in the Q&A box. So as a reminder for everyone, if you have a question, drop it in the Q&A. We'll get through them on as we proceed the conversation. There is one here that I think is interesting. Question from Karina on, can you guys give an example of how a rule change was able to accommodate a new use case? You talked before, Amy, about how the rules are responding to innovations in the market. And perhaps if that innovation is around B2B use case, that'd be particularly helpful. But just give us another example of how a rule change was able to accommodate for something that the market was demanding.
Sure. Well, we mentioned the web earlier, but I'll give another example, which was the check conversion. So again, this is an older example, but it's just top of mind at this point. the industry worked together through pilot phases, as well as work in what used to be called council, and now is part of the Payments Innovation Alliance, to really determine what the industry needed to be able to take the information off of a check and process that information electronically. And so throughout those processes, the rulemaking processes, we ended up with 3 different SEC codes. And with every standard entry class code we have a rule set that goes along with it to accommodate the various types of check conversion. So because it is a very big lift to add new standard entry class codes, some of the more recent innovations have tried not to have to do that. So with micro entries that Sam mentioned, we utilized a standard descriptor so that, again, in that standardization he mentioned, it allows for the identification of those micro entries and the application of those rules. So again, because account validation is becoming so much more prevalent in the industry, that standardization allows for the interoperability as well as, any kind of application of risk management by both the sending and the receiving parties. And so those are some examples of, further back with more, bigger changes, and then more recent where we try as much as we can to minimize the tech impact.
We got a couple of questions here as well about compliance, fraud, dealing with ACH returns. I'm curious to hear from you, Amy. What are some of the innovations that have been put to market to help minimize the risk for ACH participants?
I think there are a lot of really great solutions that are that have come out of even just the rules around risk management. So we have requirements in the rules to monitor certain types of returns. So there are solutions out there, and either in-house or vendor, et cetera, that really are better now at monitoring the types of forward transactions against the returns, learning from that, applying analytics to determine perhaps how risky another transaction might be based off of learned behavior. And so I think that, again, things like the micro entry rule, we're seeing innovations come out for enhanced monitoring of those. So a lot of things, come out of the rules to, provide easier compliance. So that's how, again, these things, I think really all work together.
Yeah, I just to piggyback on that, Amy, I think it was a few years ago even that Nacha implemented the rules for web debits, that you need to actually have a commercially reasonable solution for validating accounts. And so I think one of the ways that you drive innovation, or Nacha drives innovation in respect to fraud, is by being able to say, like, well, here's the rule now. You do have to figure out how to authorize and figure out, is this person allowed to receive debits from me? And so just by putting it in the rules that this is a requirement, I think the industry has gone, okay, we have to comply now, or else we don't meet the rules. And so you see a lot of companies such as Modern Treasury innovating in that space to go and figure out, okay, how can we make sure everyone who's originating payments complies to this rule? So sometimes the innovation is just saying, here's a rule now, you have to go follow it, go figure it out with some guidelines. Here's some helpful resources and partners you can talk to.
Yes, and that one is an interesting example as well, because with the account validation piece for the web debit rule, that language actually was in the guidelines for web going all the way back to the early 2000s. But in listening to the market and seeing how things were evolving, it became obvious that people weren't aware of that. And so we moved, that language. And then everybody, as you said, became aware. And so a lot of different things have spun off of that in terms of, the micro entries, and we're also still having conversations with our rulemaking groups around pre-notes and how can we improve the pre-note process. And, not to give away anything we'll talk about later, but just to say that there's going to be, you know, a lot of risk management focus coming out of Nacha, that really is focused on looking at processes and procedures to try to identify and minimize instances of fraud and things that, you know, that we're hearing about, particularly on, you know, not always, but there's on the B2B side is different kind of scams than on the consumer side, right? And so that really does, you know, provide opportunity for looking at transactions in a different way and being able to, you know, analyze the data that you're so richly able to get through an ACH transaction.
We're getting a handful of questions from the audience on international payments interoperability. We'll come back to those in the end. There's a handful of other questions here about how Nacha and Modern Treasury work together. One from Robert and one from Janice. And I think that's a really nice segue to the next question I had for you, Sam, which is there's a host of customer stories that we can share in terms of how some of our customers are using the ACH network to drive efficiency in their business or unlock new payment experiences. And I'd love to hear from you on a handful of these.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to maybe like answer that question a little direct or a little indirectly, Modern Treasury is an ACH service provider. So we help originators, which are companies who originate ACH payments. We help originators get their payments correctly formatted, sent to their financial institution, and then we help monitor for returns and we do reconciliation at the very end. And so we deal with a lot of originators who are high volume customers who do a lot of payments and have a variety of different use cases, but they all have use cases that align very nicely with the benefits and the advantages of using the ACH network. So one of our customers that we use that uses us quite a bit is a online kind of stock investing company. And what they do is that every day they essentially take small amounts from a consumer's bank account and they invest that into the stock market. And so, you know, sometimes these payments are for 33 cents or 79 cents or $1.50. They're very, very small payments. And they're doing it constantly. Like every consumer, I think, gets a debit basically every day. And so there's, you know, tens of thousands of these debits that go through Modern Treasury that we're intaking for this customer. And what's really interesting is that that's something that can only happen on the ACH network. I mean, the ACH is the only network that allows debits in the United States. So the ACH system is the only way we can properly debit a consumer and have the money. And also the nature of these, they're small, they're not micro deposits, they are real money, but they're not, you know, they're not $10, they're $1. You know, it's kind of the cost of the ACH system that's really advantageous for one of Modern Treasury's customers. And so they like that there's this low cost system that clears, you know, next day because they don't need, speed is not of the issue here, and that they can debit and they're doing tens of thousands of payments and they can't do that by hand. And so they use a service provider like Modern Treasury to automate all these payments, keep a track on them, and monitor for any returns that might come up, such as an insufficient funds return. And so we have a lot of customers in that space. We have a customer called Navan, which does expense management. It's a travel platform for companies to book travel. We have an insurance company called health insurance company called Sana. A variety of different use cases, but they all boil down to they send a lot of money, credits and debits to consumer bank accounts. And ACH really, because of its ubiquity, nearly 100% in the United States, I don't know of a single financial institution that doesn't have ACH. Because of the ubiquity, you need to be able to connect to the ACH network, and you need tools like Modern Treasury in order to help you do that. So, Lucas, did I answer your question a little? And I think I got all the points there.
Yes, yes. And I think there's a host of success stories as well on Nacha's website in terms of how companies are using ACH successfully, and a lot of them even outside the world of tech. And Amy, is there anything you'd like to add to kind of success stories that you think are important to highlight?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. There are some great success stories, use cases, et cetera, out on our website in different, as you said, kind of I don't want to use the word silos, but a lot of different industries. One that we've recently been calling out is healthcare, and in particularly dental space. Nacha has done a good amount of work in the last couple of years of letting folks in the healthcare space know about ACH and electronic payments, not just for the claim side, so the insurance company paying the doctor, but also for patient payments as well. And so we've really seen, a lot of great increases. Their, claim payments are almost up 8% over last year, and that's total. That's all kinds of healthcare. But there's a lot of great stuff out there, even talking about, like I said, the patient payments as well. There's a lot of cost savings and times, a lot of good quotes, up to 50% of savings for, switching from checks over to those electronic payments. And particularly when talking about those patient payments, so the consumer payments, it's safer than their employees having to deal with the checks, of course, and they're already familiar with the process if they're doing it for their claims. So on the B2B side, and so yeah, that's an interesting space to watch, and we've got some really great success stories out there of how for these, what in essence are very small businesses have really managed to gain efficiencies.
And then on the other, and this is a question that just came in from the audience. On the other side, in the side of like fintechs and large financial services that are tech centric, and one of the questions here from Scott is whether apps like Venmo and PayPal use ACH. I think at Modern Treasury, we see a lot of consumer fintech apps using ACH as part of their backbone infrastructure. So Sam, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this before with the ubiquity. I don't think they do use ACH. I don't think you can have a consumer-focused company that deals with consumer bank accounts in the United States and not touch the ACH network. I mean, most everyone has access to the ACH system in some capacity. And so every large fintech has access to the ACH system and does a lot of consumer-focused payments over ACH. And like I said, ACH is the only system where we can do debits. And a lot of like B2C use cases involve debits. And so usage of ACH, Amy, did you mention the total overall volume number? It's gigantic.
31.5 billion payments.
Yeah. It's large. And so no, the ACH system is well used in the US and continues to grow. Again, to call back to my previous comments, I think continues to grow in large part due to a dynamic rules making process that allows it to grow and allows it to accommodate use cases in a safe way for all the participants.
Another question from the audience that I think tees up a question that I wanted to ask you, Amy, is what is next for the ACH network from a rules and regulations standpoint? Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. What is top of mind for you guys?
Sure. This is quite timely. We are in the process of trying to set our priorities for the year. But number one is something I mentioned before, which is risk management. We've had a number of risk management proposals we've been working on for a few months, and those should be going forward. It's very important to manage the risk in the network. As you open it up for more and more usage, you then also have to manage the risk. But as I mentioned before, there is also innovation that is born out of that risk management as well. So like I said, a lot of different ways, to think about, how we process our transactions and be, mindful of them, and introduce less risk into the network, work to protect ourselves as well as our customers. So that's first and foremost. Also on our plate is international transactions. I heard that mentioned before. Clearly, we all hear that especially on a global scale, there is an increase both on the consumer, the P2P type of cross-border payments, as well as global business is growing. There's a lot more interoperability, and so we're seeing a lot more cross-border B2B payments as well. So when those payments cross through the United States and they go through the ACH network, we have a format for that international ACH transaction. But as things change, We need to continue to keep that format modern, and in line with things like ISO 20022 as much as we can. We are not converting the network over to ISO. We can, you can quote me on that for a very long time. But we do understand the role that that plays globally. And so we've got some proposals that we'll be looking to put out on some modernization for that format for the international transactions, as well as faster processing. So things that require rules changes in terms of perhaps new same-day ACH windows, later hours, and maybe weekends, holidays, and also ways that we can work with those operators without rules changes to expand the number of distributions, et cetera, so that the information is also being passed much more quickly. So we still have some other things. I mentioned pre-notes, exceptions processing. There's a lot going on there, but those are some of the big highlights of what we're really going to be working towards this year.
There's a lot on that list, Amy. I mean,
Yeah.
I think just as the speaking from the service provider perspective, like all of those, we have customers dealing with all of those things. And so kind of, increase processing windows, better rules around IATs, like all of those are definitely going to flow down to originators. And again, I think speaks to the power of Nacha that it can create those rules and keep the ACH system growing. Yeah, it's really quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is exciting, and we're excited to continue working with you guys on that. Getting a handful of questions that are fairly specific. So we'll end the conversation in a few minutes with your guys' advice to finance and product and payments leaders that have joined us today for this conversation. But before we do that, there's a handful of rapid fire type questions that we can take some time answering. The first one is for you, Sam. It's a question from Tanya. There's a lot of emphasis on compliance. What has Modern Treasury implemented to ensure adherence to national rules and regulations? What are some things we do, maybe under the hood, to help companies comply?
Yeah, quite a lot of things. I mean, the first thing is we encode all the rules put out by the operating rules and guidelines. One of the first things you can do to help ensure compliance and that you're meeting all the rules is by implementing all the rules. And so as a service provider, and other service providers do this as well, we have made a system such that when you send a payment through the ACH network, it is well formatted, not likely to get kicked back, and is kind of well formed by the system. And then we monitor for any returns. And so when a return comes in, we give you all the options to say, okay, what do you want to do here? What do you need to do here? Let's give you more intelligence. What does this return code actually mean? But before all of that, we also implement a lot of those things that Amy talked about with verifying accounts. So we have a micro deposit verification feature where if you want to know if a certain person using your website or app, let's say, is verified, we can do the micro deposit flow to make sure that that person is who they say they are. And so we have a whole suite of tools to verify counterparties, make sure they are who they say they are, and then be able to say, okay, now you can send them credits and debits, and they won't get returned for these reasons. They might get returned for other reasons. But we do a lot of account verification within Modern Treasury, helping you with that. We also give you a lot of analytics for monitoring your return rate, so you can manage and see hotspots and kind of take care of them before they become real problems. But managing your ACH return risk is a large part of what Modern Treasury does. And we have a large suite of tools, account verification, return monitoring, that help you get there. I could talk about that for an hour, but yeah, there's, we implement ACH. And so everything that we're required to do, and we go above and beyond that as well.
Another rapid fire type question. So we got perhaps not so rapid fire, but we got a couple of questions around open banking in the US, and there was a question from Matt. So I'll direct this one to you, Amy. Would love to hear if you have any thoughts on open banking and what role Nacha will be playing.
Oh, what, just in general? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that at this point, I'm not sure exactly the role for Nacha, other than at this point, to monitor. and to watch and see if there is any adjustment that might be needed to our rules. When you think about the introduction of issues in terms of liability and authorization. At this point, everything is just so new. So the concept being that APIs, could be used to gather the information about a party directly from their financial institution with that party's consent, gather the information needed to originate a transaction. So I think that that's the part that really is going to need to bear watching and to really compare our current rules structure on authorization and those requirements and the way that our liabilities and warranties are structured, and to make sure that it would still make sense under that format. Now, some of this, goes on today, even with there are some providers that have, similar functions today, and it works well. The structure has still remained the same, but I think that's really where our eyes will be.
Great, thank you, Amy. We are wrapping up our conversation soon, so if there are any last-minute questions from the audience, please drop them in. Another question about Modern Treasury, Sam, I'll direct back to you. So specific question around processing recall of funds, returning funds to your RDFIs, and processing proof of authorization requests. Then it's asking if this is something we can support. And then what is the role we play, if any, on ACH debit enrollment process for our customers' clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, this is similar to how does Modern Treasury, we offer account verification. We also offer a whole suite of onboarding tools for customers. So a lot of Modern Treasury customers, when they encounter a new consumer and they need to get that consumer's banking information, what they'll do is they'll use Modern Treasury's intake form or counterparty intake form, and we'll send that consumer a link, or they'll get to a website. And inside of the Modern Treasury app, we can collect that consumer's bank account information. We can verify that it's them. We can verify that they put in the right routing number. And what we can do is at the bottom, we can say, and I agree to the rules that I allow myself to be debited. So we're essentially taking what we know of what kind of authorization the web debit rules require from the Nacha guidelines. And we're basically building a page that says, okay, once you click this checkbox, you are agreeing and you're giving your authorization to be debited. And then we're storing that inside of Modern Treasury. And so that's kind of Modern Treasury's proof that that consumer consented to be debited. And we stored all the information that we had, their IP address, the timestamp. And so we can use that in instances where there are disputes with the bank. But to talk about like returns of funds, not only does Modern Treasury monitor returns, we also do a lot of work with dishonored returns and contested dishonored returns. Like we go very deep into the return process, where we can work with companies who are receiving a lot of payments to actually do and originate returns, and then if there's a dishonored return that comes back, help manage that return of funds and decide what the next steps are. And so we go very deep into the ACH process. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to it in the book that I'm sure Amy's well aware of. But yeah, Modern Treasury goes very deep into return flows. But again, could talk about that for 3 hours, but something that we as a service provider support.
One last question for Amy that I'm taking from the audience. There's a question here about same-day transaction limit. Are there any plans to increase that transaction limit, or what are some considerations that you guys are thinking about when you think about same-day transaction limits?
Yes. I mean, when you ask us specifically, what are your top goals for same day ACH? Between expanding the hours, right under that is dealing with the limit. But I think that we've decided to work on expanding the hours first. So we originally had a limit of 25,000 per transaction. We bumped that up once to 100, then now we're up again at 1 million. And so basically, when you look at the phases of same day ACH and how we implemented, we took a measured approach for a reason. And folks really wanted to get used to having transactions later in the day before that risk was further increased by them being in even high dollar amounts. So what we've heard from our committees thus far is let's get the later hours, adjust to that, and then we will look at the dollar amount. But again, everything is subject to public comment when we go out for it. But very much the dollar limit plan is very high on our roadmap for same day ACH.
Great, thank you, Amy. Sam, Amy, I wanted to, say thanks for joining us in the conversation today. I think it was a really interesting walkthrough of the innovations in the ACH network, how companies use the ACH network, and some really interesting stats on how ubiquitous the network is. I guess to close the conversation, I'm really curious about from the role that both of our organizations play in the market, what's perhaps one piece of advice that you'd give to finance, payments, and product leaders that have joined us today in terms of working with the ACH network, and how can they use it to drive innovation in their own companies? And maybe I'll start with you, Sam.
One piece of advice. Well, if you're specifically focused on innovation, this is going to sound very trite, but use the ACH network. Like, use all the features that it is available to you. I mean, just in this conversation alone, we've talked about micro deposits, debits, same-day credits. We've talked about international payments. Like, there's check conversions. Like, I think one of the biggest ways that you can innovate within your company vis-a-vis the ACH network is to really explore all that it has to offer and to take advantage of a well-established rule set that very clearly will help automate processes internally. So we see there's very often this case where a new customer will come to us or a prospect with this use case, and we'll say, hey, you can do this with ACH, and this is how you do it. And you can do this with Modern Treasury. And so some people, when they're like, oh, I'm going to have to send a wire, I'm going to have to do this thing, it's like, no, you just need to do an IAT payment because ACH can help you support that. So yeah, there's really a lot of like, really learn the ACH network and see what it has to offer, because it's a very rich, growing system in the US. And yeah, I don't think there's any end to the possibilities of, if you're looking at payments innovation.
Mm-hmm.
I would really just add on to what Sam is saying. And of course, I'm going to give a shout out, to Nacha. But I know not everybody wants to, get into the weeds like Sam and I do when it comes to, payments, rules, etc. But I think that at least taking advantage of the resources, when you check out things like, the Nacha website, it can give you a lot of really good information about some of these innovations. But not only that, one of the benefits of Nacha is, the networking that we can provide. That doesn't necessarily have to just be through events, but, dealing with a partner that is keeping their ear to the ground, is close in with Nacha, understands the rules, understands, not even just the rules, but some of the other discussions, things that are going on in the Payments Innovation Alliance and the direction, that payments are heading in general, is somebody that you really want to partner with so that you have good trust in the information that they're bringing you and providing you, that they're doing the things that, like Sam just mentioned, giving you all of these great ideas to get greater efficiency in your business. I think taking advantage of those Nacha resources can really help you, find those partners that you can trust for those kinds of reasons.
Absolutely. So, folks, thank you for joining us today. Amy, Sam, thank you for taking the time. And if you're curious about Modern Treasury or Nacha, you can find a lot of information online. We'll follow up with everyone that signed up for the conversation today with more resources and a recording of this conversation. So thank you all.